Welcome to the podcast. My name is Jody Luke, and I have had the great privilege of hosting the second season of the Love Does podcast. We are in studio today, and I always love connecting with people who I've had a bunch of shared experiences because it's like I get to just talk to friends. And so that's what we're doing. I think about my role here at Love Does, and one of the biggest challenges I face is how to convey all the stories behind Love Does because there's so many. And that's why we started the podcast as a way to do that. But also, I recognize the power of a still image or a video to convey and inspire and inform in ways that, honestly, words just fall short. Love Does has been around for a long time now, and there is no one who has visited our projects or our countries more than our guest on today's podcast. Tyler Wohlford is an uber talented international multimedia journalist who works under the name Halle Project, and he works for other organizations as well. I sort of feel like that's cheating on us, but I've gotten over it. And he's fun, and he is generous, and he's kind, and he has a great smile. I actually think that's your secret power that makes people talk to you. But he has this really remarkable ability to share the heart and soul of Love Does, and he's been doing it for a long time now. So I invited him to come from behind the camera to be in the spotlight on this podcast. You have reluctantly agreed. So thanks, Tyler, for being here.
Thank you, Jody. It's it's really nice to be here. We have been through a lot of things together.
That is true. And we're going to get to some of those.
Yeah.
But you are a fascinating guy. You have lived a life that very few people on earth have lived. You've seen things that lots of people just never get the opportunity to do that. So I thought it might be fun, if you're up for it, to do some rapid fire questions for those people that don't know you. If you're up for it, just to kind of get to know you.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
And obviously just generally just out of your head. But you've traveled a lot. So how many years have you been doing this?
Since 2008. Yeah. So some friends and I started this in 2008, but went full time in about like 2015.
Okay. Yeah. So you don't want to do the math on that. I get it.
No.
More of a creative guy. It's good. Yeah. No, you can do everything. All right. How many countries have you ever counted? How many countries have you been to?
I haven't. I think it's close to somewhere around 60.
That's not bad.
Yeah,
and how many? But what's unique is some people have been to tons of countries, but how many countries would you consider conflict zones have you been to?
I think that depends on who you are and what you consider conflicts or not. But probably around like 7 to 10.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how many times have you thought like, this might be the end?
One for sure.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to get to it, but there's been a few where there was some, dicey situations, but I would say one for sure. That was a little.
Yeah. What is a country that you have not been to that you would like to visit?
Wow. That's, it's always hard because if it's like personal, you're like, I don't know, somewhere warm with warm water. Yeah. That's nice. But when it's for work, I'm open to go where things are happening. So it's so nice to be able to go to places where people are involved in their community and making it better. And so sometimes it's not like the coolest places or the best food or the nicest weather. So I'm really like always open for going to the places that not a lot of people get to go to. And mostly I would say that is because we want to like share what's happening there.
So anywhere, really?
Yeah.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Probably like cicada larva.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I lived in China for a year, and it was in the Northwest, and there's some very interesting things there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How many times have you gotten sick? Because, when people travel, a lot of times they get sick. Do you get sick often?
Not really anymore. Yeah. My friend always jokes about like me having the best like gut biome. Yes. And he's like, I kind of want to just get it tested just to see what's going on. I'm like, it's probably really messed up, but I'm like, good.
Yeah.
But I'd say probably like really sick, like 4 or 5 times.
So you have a steel stomach.
Yeah, I think so. My dad used to always joke about that for himself. Like when we were kids, he said he had a cast iron stomach, could eat anything. And we're like, whatever.
It's hereditary. You were made to do this.
I think so.
Where have you visited that you left and it was like, that was unreal? Like either it was just, you didn't expect that it would be like that, or it was just so pretty. I don't know, that it was just unreal.
There's been a lot, obviously, both with like nature and landscapes and then just people in general. But I think one of the ones that really struck me the hardest was the first time I went to Somalia. And just like the beauty and the devastation mixed together. And then, we work there with people that are like extremely hopeful in these really hard situations. And then you learn someone's background and you're like, no, that's not that person. Like, I know him like this. And so I think being able to see all that and experience that is just like always surreal.
So the juxtaposition and all of that. Is this, that's it for the rapid fire questions that I'm sure I could have a whole lot more, but in your mind, is this surprising to you that this is what you were doing with your life? Or when you were a little kid, were you like, that's my big dream. That's what I always wanted to do.
It's very surprising. My family didn't travel much or at all, really, ever outside the US for sure. And, but I was always fascinated with it. But I had a little plan for my life. It wasn't like I'm going to be a doctor or anything super specific, but it was like I had a plan and it kind of like fell apart. And I think, so I had like this map, in my brain, and it's like somehow I ended up like way off the map. And so you're just like, I didn't see any of this coming.
You found yourself all over the map, actually.
I never thought about that, but yeah.
When you take, so you've been doing this since 2008, 2015, you've seen a lot. When you take a particular image or there's a video that you put together, what do you hope that somebody comes away thinking or feeling?
Yeah. I want to say hope. I think I don't know why it's like something that's really like I've latched onto, but I really love sharing hope in those really hard situations. And so I don't think we want to do stuff where it's you see something and you see someone at their worst or at their lowest or their hardest spot or something's happened in their country and they can't help it. But you want to say like, hey, actually there's good people in the world who are partnering with their people of their own country or community or international people coming in and doing this to like create a better, hopefully, life and situation for someone. And so I think my heart is that like, even though things are bad, that that people are good and that we can help each other and take care of each other. So I want like those ideas to be able to come forth.
How do you not just get numb sometimes, because you've seen so many different situations and so many things? How do you stay in the moment and continue to feel? Or maybe you have. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, so I could see that be a real possibility. But how do you stay real and vulnerable in it?
I think you do become numb sometimes. Yeah. And I think it ebbs and flows. And so, sometimes you're in a spot and you're just like, I just need this done. And so you just kind of work your way through it. Or being in those spots, that, obviously if I'm working for an organization, it's like something's required of me after, hence like photos or video or whatever it is. So you're like, I just need to do this. So even though it's like scary or tough or really like tragic, you're like, how do we work through? And then I think for myself, a lot of it is like mental processing and emotional processing in editing. So, editing is not always the most fun part of the work, but I think a lot of times you're like going through the images and you're like, oh, that's what I was feeling when I took this. Or like, that's what I didn't see that was like just on the other side of the frame. And so you kind of like get to go through and I think like relive some of the stuff and help process it. Cause I think without that, sometimes it's just like gathering experiences and moving on. And then you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. and probably given some space and time for that. Sometimes you have the luxury of that. Probably sometimes you don't. So when you're putting together a video or you're thinking through how you're doing your still photos, is it your own distinct way of doing it that comes through with each one? Or do you try to almost look, every organization has its own personality, right? Or do you try to almost be a chameleon and get into their voice? How do you put all that together?
Yeah, I think you want, it's almost like I'm the filter, right? So it's like you have these organizations that have their programs and their people, and they're trusting me to like capture it through my eyes and then like put it back out. So I think a lot of it is like, what is the nature of the organization? Like, what is their heart? What's their mission? And then utilizing my skill set to put forth hopefully something that they love and enjoy and that shares them well. And so I think it's a combo. I think people trust me, and then if you work together more and more, it's like you can kind of hear someone's voice or help them shape their voice if you need to, or sometimes it's just showing up and capturing what's already there, and it's the nature of who they are is already on display.
Well, you do it really well.
Thank you.
What is the personality of Love Does? I put you on the spot. And what would you say? I mean, you've worked with us for a long time.
Yeah, I would say it's, I think it's a lot of joy in tough places. And I think for people that don't know Love Does from the outside, it can maybe seem flippant at first, where it's just like, hey, you're in a war zone, like throw balloons at it. But there's so much more to that. And so it's not glossing over the problems at all, but it's like bringing a bit of like color and light and hope into a spot that like people don't see it that often. And so I think honestly, because of Love Does, not that you guys do this all the time, but like whenever I'm working anywhere with kids, I like get in full uncle mode where it's like I'll go to the store and buy all the candy, and then like when people aren't looking, I'm just like handing candy out to the kids. And it's like, they could be in such a rough situation, or you don't know what home's like, or you don't think that like some small deed or act will actually change someone, and it does. I mean, you remember being in Poland, and there was like refugees coming off the train, and we had gone to the store and bought all the Kinder eggs, like all of them. And at first I was like, okay, this is very strange. And people like had just fled their country. It was like old people and kids, and it was just like the joy of people getting like a chocolate egg with a toy in it was mind-blowing. Like I didn't think that was going to happen. And then just the change of someone's whole like demeanor and attitude, and even the facial expression is surreal.
It's really true. We have one of those pictures sitting in our office, and I can imagine there was a before and after picture of the realization. It was like the heaviness of what they'd been through. You could see it in the lines of their face. And then when they were offered a Kinder egg, and really just somebody basically just said, I see you and I care about what you're going through. And then helping them to remember happier times and hope that maybe there would be some in the future. Their entire face changed. The lines in their face turned. It was really kind of remarkable. How did you meet Bob, though? I mean, how did that all happen?
Oh, wow. A friend had given me his book a long time ago, the Love Does book.
Yeah.
And I started to read the book, and I've told Bob this, so I don't feel bad saying it, but like, I was like, this man is naive, and you can't live life like this. But then as you read it a little more, you're like, well, I kind of like him. He's like, adorable, I guess. And he's doing some great things. But then as I got further on, he talked about his organization, which at the time was called Restore International. And I was like, oh, that's like what I care about. So I like looked up to Restore, and there wasn't a lot of media, and there wasn't a lot of you had the work going on, but there wasn't a lot visually to show for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had like reached out and I was just like, hey, this is what I do. And like, do you guys want to like partner together sometime? Like, here's my portfolio. And then it was a little bit later and I heard back from the director at the time, Day, and she was like, looks good. Keep up the good work. I was like, oh man, I guess it's not that good. But I felt like this conviction to keep pursuing. And so every time I'd go to a country that Love Does was in, I was just like, hey, I'm here in Uganda. Like, do you want to do something? And they're like, I don't think it's the right time. I was like, okay. And then there was a trip where I was in Nepal at the same time. Love Does had a team there. And we're like, let's meet up. And so we did. And they realized that I'm not crazy. And that, and they hadn't really done a lot of media at the time. And so did a little bit with the girls' house you have there. And there was some earthquake cleanup and the founding of the after school program. And and Dave was like, this is really helpful. I was like, that's like the whole point of why I do this. Like when I started in like 2008, 2009, I had so many organizations where I would like make something for them. I used to have to convince them that that video would be helpful. It was like, I don't even know if YouTube was running at the time. And I used to like have to be like, no, I promise this will be good. And they'll do it. And they're like, well, this is so helpful. I'm like, that's why I do this. And then they would tell me about how, they had someone come on a trip and do some stuff for them. But then when they got home, they didn't have time to edit it or they went MIA or whatever. And I was like, that's literally why I do this. Mm-hmm. It's like, these are the things that I care about. And this is an avenue that I can actually do some stuff. And so I'm going to focus on it. And instead of, I don't know, so many people will do photography in different realms when they're home to like pay bills and stuff. But I'm like, I want to be in these places and like, I want to have something to offer. And so, yeah.
So much of it though is about timing, but it's also about persistence. And then, the door opens, but then you have to do excellent work. And that's where it's been the synergy of all of that coming together. And you do excellent work.
Thank you.
But there's a story that Bob talks about with your dreads.
Oh, right.
And that's kind of a more famous story because you wrote about it right in the book. So tell us a little bit the behind the scenes of that story.
It feels so long ago now that it's, sometimes it feels like a different life. But I used to have dreads and I hadn't cut my hair for like, I don't know, 13 years.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy.
I mean, there's so much to it and nothing at the same time. But we had started working together and it was actually that trip to Somalia, that first trip. And I remember I was like, I went to my office and I sat down and I was like about to work and this email came in from Bob and he's like, hey, like we have this trip coming up to Somalia. Like we really want you to come with us. There's just one thing, like we need to go like a little bit low profile. And so like, you're going to need to cut your hair. And like my beard was really long. And he's like, you're going to have to like, tighten it up. I'm like, beard, whatever. Like I'll trim it up.
I mean, wow. So like, what was your first thought? Like, I can't believe what were you thinking?
I was just like, I remember I couldn't sit down. I just started like walking around my office and I was like the first one there. So none of my friends were there. And, one of my friends came in and I kind of told him and he goes, is this the work you want to do? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, kind of seems silly not to get a haircut for it, huh? And I said,
it's more than just a haircut.
I said, emotionally, I'm not there yet. But I was kind of like, I put words to what I was feeling. Where I was like, these are the spaces I want to be. And it wasn't like, I don't know. I think so many people have an identity of certain things. And I think for me, it was just like a comfort. Like it was just like almost like an act of where I was trying to just learn who I was through my 20s, I guess. And so some of that was like, with anything of identity, you're like, do people like me because I look different or because of this, or do they like me for like me?
You.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Thank you. And so it was weird because I was like, oh, I didn't know I had those issues. And then, but, so we had like, I don't know, 4 weeks or something. And so I ended up, there's a, there's a monastery up at Big Sur. And I went up there, and you can like stay there and do solitude retreats and stuff. And so I went up there and I like cut them off myself.
Do you have any pictures?
Of the cutting?
Yeah, the process, nothing.
No. It was very, I guess like personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't usually take a lot of photos when I'm not working. So.
Wow. Well, that's it's an interesting dynamic between some of the emotions that you have and also just what your head says.
Yeah.
And I think you probably encounter that a lot too in the places that you go that are full of conflict. And a lot of people have a lot of fear, sometimes just even leaving their communities. In the US, it's kind of wild. How do you navigate fear in some of these actually really dangerous places sometimes?
I think it's trusting who you're with. So sometimes it's just like gut feelings. Sometimes like, oh, Jody invited me, like she knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, you should totally keep going with that.
Or it's like, she has friends on the ground. So everyone's kind of like, do you just show up in places, or how does that work? I'm like, no, I mean, I'm not like, I don't know. I'm not like a adventurer in that sense. Like usually there's someone on the ground that is working the programs that I get to spend time with. And so I think it's trusting that people are going to take care of you.
So is it an adrenaline junkie kind of thing? Like I love to go to these far off places that maybe there's conflict, or is it more no, it's like the purpose behind why I'm going is so motivating to me that it helps me to get over that fear.
Yeah, I think there's got to be purpose in it for me. I think I can see why like war photographers are like adrenaline junkies for sure. It's but I think it's more just I'm like so fascinated. Like I'm a curious person, and I like love getting to see and experience new things and people, and it like makes me feel alive. And so I think there's some of it where you're like, okay, I could probably slow down a little. It's kind of a lot like, one trip that you would do could be like another person's like trip of a lifetime. Yes. And I'm like, oh, I just partnered up like 3 of those on like one grouping just because it worked out, it's close by, or, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think there's something about, like that like hope and that, vision of seeing things happen for people and for kids that like keeps driving me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To get over that fear so that there's something more powerful going on there. Some of the organizations that you work with are faith-based and some are not. And you've gone all around the world. You've been in a lot of different situations. I know faith can be complicated, but how has it impacted your faith?
Wow. Yeah, that's
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I tell everyone it kind of like depends on the day. Like if you ask me tomorrow, you might get a different answer than today. Or if you ask me yesterday. But I would say it's played a huge role on like impacting my faith. And yeah, I think it's what I've come to is like the more I see, the less I really know. Where I think I grew up not even like that stringent, but I think comparatively maybe more like there were, you believe this certain thing or it has to be this way, or like, I mean, that's why there's so many denominations, especially in the Christian churches. And people are like, no, it has to be this way. And I think the more I go places, you're just like, I don't know. It's not my thing. I'm just here to like love people. Right. And so I think it's letting go of all those tightly held things that, some people feel like are really life and death, but then on the other side, there's like people actually experiencing life and death. And so it's like, what do you do with that? It's like, you just show up. And so I think it's expanded my view exponentially and helped me not be like the decider. It's like, that's not my role. So
you are a forever student.
Trying. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it. On this podcast, we have highlighted lots of the countries that we're in. We're in 14 countries. You visited almost all of them. I think the only one that you haven't is Israel, which is wild. But a couple of them we haven't been able to highlight yet. So I thought it might be helpful to just get your observations for some of the ones that we haven't talked about yet. And one of them is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. You were just there. It's a complicated country. There's a lot of conflict that's occurring all the time. So tell us a little bit about what it feels like to be in that country, and then what access to education from your perspective has meant to those kids at our Love Does school there.
Yeah, I'm not a political expert, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I can tell you like what I've seen and what I've experienced. And so Love Does has a school that's on the eastern side in the city of Goma, which is built on a volcano and on a lake. It's very beautiful. Everything's just lava rock. It's like dark soil, if soil. And Congo has like a lot of conflict from very many vast reasons. And so currently there's been like a huge uptick of that. And so there's been all the people from the countryside that are fleeing to the city for safety. I've had stories of obviously like people dying on the way and other very terrible things happening. And so this has had like a huge uptick recently. And when we were there, it's like I usually go like every year, and you can see the difference. Like I could give you side by sides. There's just tents everywhere. And it's like not just a tent, it's like a tarp over a couple poles, and then people are sleeping like on the rocks. Like 6 people in like a, I don't know, 6x6 tarp tent. And they say right now that there's 1 million extra people in the city. And
it's not that big of a city.
It's not. And the government's just like, take whatever, any open space, go for it. And so it's just like very stark seeing that. And then in the midst of that, there's different pockets of what's going on, but visited the Love Does school. And a few years ago, the school was built in, what was it, 2019?
Yep.
And then in 2020, the volcano erupted. And it hadn't erupted, I think, since 2002, I think, previously. And it took out the school. And you can still go there and see some of the walls sticking up out of the lava and like half a chalkboard. And so the kids were, the next year I visited, or after the volcano, the kids were they did big tents from, I think the UN provided them, and the kids were all just sitting on broken cinder blocks for desks of their old school, and were just like wanting to learn. So it's just like little pockets of kids under these tents, like this is first grade and this is second grade, and they're just sitting on the broken pieces of their school. That's like how bad they want to be there. And then the school was rebuilt, and it's beautiful. They made them do it out of wood because they didn't want, I don't know, permanent structure. Some interesting thing. But I was just there and visited, and was able to actually go to a family's house. And I was like, what kind of brought you here? And they're like, well, we're from here, but like our house burnt down recently, and so we're staying with these people, and we have 2 kids at the school. And we're like, what would you do, if you didn't have this? And I'm like, we don't know. There are other daughters at home, and she's got cerebral palsy. And it's just like they're barely making it. And
what I love about our school in Congo is, Love Does build schools, but there we also rebuild schools. And just the commitment to education and hope and opportunity in the face of repeated hardship, I think in some ways has communicated to those kids resilience in a way that maybe wouldn't have before. And that's what I always think of when I'm thinking of Congo. The volcano is central to the story. So I love that you highlighted that part of it. You alluded to it earlier, but Nepal, you've been to, kind of started the whole relationship.
Right.
Love our team there.
They're the best.
Robbie, who just thinks you're the best.
He just messaged me yesterday.
Did it, of course. Yeah. Sham and Amrita. I mean, they're just really wonderful people. We've got the girls' home and an after-school program, and then a school at the brick factory for the workers who come so that they can have school during the seasonal time. But you've been there quite a few times, and so it's like these little time hops.
Right.
Any observations for your time on the ground in Nepal?
Yeah, I think one of the things I like about Love Does, and I don't know if I assume it's strategic, but usually when stuff happens, you just jump in. And so Nepal was like earthquake, and it's like, do you do disaster relief? Not really, but we can like help these people. We had a connection, and then from that, I'm like, okay, so like after the immediate trauma is kind of past, like what would be helpful? And that was with Robbie. It was like after school program, and his family is all in. It's like his mom cooks meals for the kids. I don't even know. I think she just does it on her own.
So generous.
And so I love the concept of jumping in, because I think a lot of people are afraid to start. And then from there, being like, okay, what's like really helpful? Like, what can we actually do? And so I think Nepal's a great example of that. And then knowing Sham, and we're like, what other opportunities are there? And he was just like, we have these factories of seasonal workers, and their kids are very uneducated. Surprised if, they're outdoor kids.
Right. We took some pictures with them last year.
Yeah.
And you noticed that. That was an observation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was kind of a cool picture because it was in this brick factory. And then you see these kids running around, and you saw the picture of what their life would be without structure in school. Yeah. And so it is, I love that we jump in. I think it's a little bit strategic in the sense that education is central to so much of what we do at Love Does. So we always sort of default to the schools, and it really does give the biggest opportunity for change. And so that's where we jumped in there. And of course, we are also in Burkina Faso. It's a country in Western Africa. Not that many people know about it. You went over when we were just building the primary school, and I think we're expanding to do a secondary school. There's going to be more on that to come in the future months, and I think next year. But tell us a little bit about, Burkina Faso. It's a wild place.
Yeah, it had at the time just been through like 2 separate coups. So the government was changing, militia was running it, and we were like, I'm gonna be in the region. Do you want me to go? And you're like, yeah, I think so. Like, let's talk to one of our friends who knows.
Just in the region, but you were.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, yeah.
And we're like, let's talk to our friend who has connection to the State Department. Be like, is it actually safe or is it not? And so like those things are the ones where it's like, not just like, okay, there's conflict, let's go. But it's like you have someone that knows something, and then you have a trusted friend on the ground in Deme.
Always.
And so it was like,
and he talk about families, because we're talking about Robbie and his family, and of course Sham and Amrita, and it's same in Congo. It's a family affair there as well with Edison and Cassandra. But Pastor Deme, he brought his whole family.
Like his kids, adult children, came from far away to come pick me up at the airport. And I'm like, I don't know why you're here. Like, they didn't really make it a big deal, but I was like, you guys came just because I showed up? They're like, yeah, you showed up. Like, this is a big deal. And you're doing this for our community. And like, this is a big deal. And, at times I'll show up as like, representative of Love Does. And that's what it was. And so they gave me like this treatment that was so like hospitable and generous and surprising. Yeah. And so it was like, Burkina's just struggling. And it's pretty like dry and deserty. And there's not a lot for people to do. So
the school is almost like an oasis in the middle. And it really almost looks like that from the pictures. I know we're hopefully visiting next year. So that's going to be because it's really provided a lot of hope in that region that almost has nothing.
Yeah. And there was like, all the people in the community were extremely excited about the school coming, and like they could see the pillars like start to get put in, and just I mean, we just like showed up in the vehicle where the site was, and people just came out of nowhere.
But that's where I love the pictures, because it is desolate. It's very gray. And then you have people show up in these beautiful, colorful dresses, and the stark contrast, which is really kind of a picture of your life, the stark contrast of all the stuff you're doing. But Burkina Faso is a great example of that. And then, of course, India. India was where Bob first started with Love Does. Of course, it was called Restore International at that time, and the anti-sex trafficking work, and working a lot with Moses. And, we've kind of expanded a little bit into a boys and girls home, and we're continuing to kind of find our way there. But India also has a unique personality to it. So when you land in India, tell us like what that smells like, looks like, feels like. What is it like to be in that country?
Yeah, I've been to India a couple times, and I'd never been to the city where Love Does works in Bangalore. And like, shocking. I didn't actually know this, but Bangalore is like the Silicon Valley of India.
Right. Yeah.
So we like get to the airport, and it's like gold, like everything's gold. And I was like, what is going on here? And so you have this like, I mean, there was huge high rises and all these things, and it was like clean and spotless. And I'm like, this is wild. I hadn't been to this kind of India before. And but get to spend time with our family there. And it's this man who grew up like almost on the border with like, what is it, Bhutan up there. And he grew up with nothing, and he made his way to the city, and he got an education and all these things. And then he goes back to his hometown, and there's so many people in that region that just have nothing and can't provide anything for their kids. And so they provide like a refuge and a space for kids to get education so that they can choose what they want to do from there. And so it's this, I love the concept that it's just like this, it's kind of like with the eggs, where there's one small act that's, you're like, okay, but in a country of over 1 billion people, like how much is that actually going to affect? But
it
then
matters for those kids.
It does.
It's life changing.
Right. And you don't know who they're going to become or what they're going to do. And so I love that kind of concept where you could be like just this little unknown in this giant city, and just making a huge difference for some kids that didn't have opportunities. Yeah.
You have met and encountered so many different men, women, and children. And often you encounter their stories at really a difficult time. Sometimes there's a lot of joy and all sorts of things, but you've encountered quite a few where it's been tough for them. And then you've earned the trust for them to tell you their stories or to share something. What has it meant to you over the course of your career, you can really say career, to have played that role of either, sharing the stories of people who really needed to share it, or just highlighting some of the situations around the world in hopes that it would bring resources to them? But what has it meant to meet all of those people?
It's phenomenal. I think some people don't understand, even in my life, like what I actually do. And so it's like, if I was just traveling to travel, it's like after a while you're like, who cares, or you just are like, oh, I'm going to go see the Eiffel Tower. And you're like, see it. But when you get to like come in contact with people who are doing these like amazing things, I'm like, it's just such a driving factor. But I think it's taken a long time to learn how to get people to trust you and to do it very quickly. You go into like refugee camps or situations where it's like obvious that I'm a foreigner, and it's like, how do you make people feel comfortable? And like, as we've talked about, it's like, I don't like this side of the camera, like at all. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. And so having that internally makes me realize that I'm doing the same thing to everyone. And so you want to treat people with dignity. And then also like, knows an acceptable answer. So it's like, hey, can I take your photo? And it's like, no, great. I mean, I don't want mine taken all the time either. And so I think treating people with the dignity that they have, even if they're in a rough situation, or like we said, a smile goes a long way. You're in a lot of places where people look tough or they've experienced some things and they have just like that hard look on their face, and you just crack a smile and then they do too. You're like, oh, we're good. Like this is fine. I mean, you've seen that in Uganda, especially.
Yeah, but you've got like a dimple and you've got a great smile, super white teeth. So I think there's something special about yours.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I try to use it. So, but yeah, I think it's the concept of just making someone feel comfortable, and like, how do you do that? And I think a lot of it is just reflecting on your own self. Like if I had someone just walk up to me and I'm in a hard situation and it's like they want to talk or ask you your story or take a photo, it's like, what would I want someone to do to me? And it's like, that's how I want to treat others.
I think it's hard to process, but if you could take a step back and think about how many years you've been doing this and extrapolate how many thousands and tens of thousands of photos and all of the videos you've put together and what that impact has made on those communities and those families in really the most positive of ways to bring resources to the people that really needed it the most. It's a pretty cool thing. And I look at you, and it's remarkable to think of somebody who it's as easy for you to be in places where there's prisoners, because we've been in a number of prisons together,
recently,
both the U.S. and abroad.
Yeah.
And we've also been with presidents.
Yeah.
Also was just
also
with the
recently,
presidents. Yeah. And, you know, I think with people also that have very little, and then you join these trips with people sometimes that have a whole lot. And every single person feels like they have a story worth telling. You make them feel like that. You're a great listener. And of course, on these trips, you know, there's lots of shared meals, and we have discussed it all, you know, professionally, personally, but you also, when you encounter these things, at least I find you can't help but think about some really philosophical questions, and you're never afraid to listen and also share as people are working out their lives, and you do it in the most kind and loving way. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for doing what you've done. Thank you for choosing who you've chosen to be, and, you know, for everything you've done for Love Does and the excellence in which you've done it. I just really appreciate the relationship, and I appreciate the friendship.
Thank you. I feel very honored. Yeah. And I feel exactly the same. It's like, it's a joy to do this, and I'm very thankful that I get to spend my life doing it.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing everything you shared on today's podcast. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jody.
Hey, everybody. It's Bob Goff here. I've been part of this great caper called Love Does for quite a while. And I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. If you want to have some more information about Love Does, you can go to lovedoes.org. You could also email hello@lovedoes.org. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Here's the important part. Do something, whatever that is. Don't just agree with what you heard. What's your next courageous step? See you later.